Jeremy Haymore is the author of the Bandana Express. He'll be signing the book on Tuesday, 4:30 to 6:30 at Givens Books in Lynchburg. The book's release date also Tuesday. I asked Coach Haymore what's the most interesting fact he found out when doing his research for the book.
Really going back in Harry Ragsdale's career, Steve Ragsdale's father, going back to when he first arrived in there as a 1930. I had kind of a general outline based on an article from when he retired four from public education. Finally, after he was head coach in there, as he was principal and that type of thing. But when he finally retired, they did an article where he had talked about, when he first came there. So I had a little bit of information, kind of a framework to go by, but I knew, I thought it was interesting in those early papers, 1930s and such, that they actually had sections in the newspaper that would just kind of be what people were doing, like, just I mean, kind of like a neighborhood gossip section, but some of them were just like, oh, Harry Ragsdale and such rode to Roanoke and went to the VMI Virginia Tech game, at in Roanoke, or just kind of talking about what various people in town had done, if somebody was sick or ill, and whatever it might be. But they did put a lot of stuff in there about the schools and some of the interesting things about the school itself when people were hired. Kind of just little interesting facts that you wouldn't see in a newspaper today. But it was just so when he first came in 1930, it was interesting that in the 1974 article he had talked about, and this little excerpt's in the book, but it talks about when he first got there that the guy who was there as the male coach slash teacher, and back in those times they coached everything, but that he had quit in the middle of the year, and this conversation that he had with this prominent community member was is that he had said, they ran the last guy off, talking about the kids and how bad they were. And he said, you gotta, this is what this guy told Harry before the first day of school, that, you go in there tomorrow and the first one that gives you any trouble, you just ball that fist up and you just knock him straight down on the ground. And, Harry said in the article later on, that so he was scared to death starting the first day of school. I mean, he never heard it such. They'd run the last guy off, and this guy's like, so he ended up having a couple guys get into it the first day of school, and he kind of manhandled one of them up against something, and kind of set the tone, and that kid ended up being like the kid who scored the first touchdown for him a year later, and then he later went on to be a prominent citizen in town. He worked at the department store there, did a lot of stuff, as far as like civic responsibilities and things like that. And then was later he was the MC at his thank you banquet they had for him in the 50s when he'd been there 25 years. And anyway, it was kind of went back to that event. So I thought it was kind of interesting that, the advice he got before he went into school was, ball your fist up and knock the first one that gives you any trouble down. Like, that obviously would be stark contrast to today. But, it was interesting in those papers to find this guy's name, the guy who was there previously. It was a Mr. Jordan. There's all they had. H.B. Jordan was the guy's name. And I didn't go that far in detail in the book, but I verified that, in fact, the guy that was there before him did quit in the middle of the year, the previous year. So, was that part was true, and so I thought that was kind of the most interesting thing that I found, because those were details that Steve had never known and had never heard. Harry's nickname in college, and this went back to when I was at Lynchburg College, was Slippery Hips. How that came to be, I don't know, but that was actually in the Lynchburg College the 1930 annual, when he graduated, he was the president of student body that year. That was his name, Slippery Hips. I thought that was one of the most interesting things that I found, was kind of being able to see pictures of him, and even some stuff in the school newspaper that they put out. This was in the 1920s, so this is almost 100 years ago. I mean, just finding that stuff I thought was really kind of some of the most interesting information that I was able to uncover, because that was stuff that, like I said, people even members of his own family